Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. So recently I took a trip up to Cincinnati to visit a farm I'd heard about for a few years now called Greenacres. This is essentially a research farm that was founded in 1988, and the Greenacres Foundation is dedicated to education in agriculture, the environment, and the arts, with ecology and agricultural research supporting their mission. So basically, if no-till growers had a research farm, it would look almost exactly like this. They are doing all this amazing research with full-time researchers, including the 8-year study they are conducting on integrating livestock into gardens, which is what we're going to dive into today. In this video, I was joined by Ian Zeglen, who is the manager of operations at the gardens there at Greenacres, and he and I discussed some of what has worked and what hasn't in terms of integrating livestock, including things like which animals did and didn't work in their systems. We discussed the hedgerows they've added and the sort of wild livestock it propagates, such as birds and bugs and all the things. And we also touch on a biochar study they are working on. And I'm telling you, expect to see more from this farm in the near future and in the long term, because I'm really impressed with Ian and the whole team there. And we truly just scratched the surface of what they're up to. So let's not hold it up any longer. I'll let Ian Zeglen tell you a little bit more about Greenacres.
My name is Ian Zeglen. I'm the manager of operations here at the garden department at Greenacres. Today we're going to be talking about the trials and tribulations of integrating animals into a vegetable production system. So this is our lay field. The reason we call it our lay field is it was designed off the system of lay farming, which was a pre-industrial way of building fertility that involved grasses, legumes, letting land rest, and grazing it. The idea was basically in those kinds of systems was that you had a plot of land, you'd have it in this kind of grazing operation, and then after 2, 3, 4 years of that, you would work the soil, plant your usually grain crop, and you would have built up enough fertility with your grasses and your animals and your legumes to have enough fertility for a yield off of that particular plot of land, and it would last for 2 to 3 years of production. Generally, is how much the fertility would last for, and then you would switch it back over into the grasses and the grazing again. And so when we kind of found this system of production, we've been kind of searching for ways to integrate our livestock production into our vegetable production. At a point in time, livestock and vegetables were married, and through industrialization and a lot of changes in the world, those two became divorced. And so when we look at building healthy soil, we truly believe that animals have a beneficial impact on soil if they're managed well. Animal impact is one of the 5 principles of soil health. And so in following those principles, it's a big hurdle to try and figure out how to reintegrate animals into vegetable production systems, especially when it comes to like a market garden style veg system. So the first kind of thing we did was we separated our field into 4 quadrants. Each of those quadrants is roughly an acre. 2 of those quadrants are in production and 2 of those quadrants are in pasture. And each year, 1 quadrant is rotated from pasture into production, and then one of the other production blocks is rotated out of production and into pasture. So it's this kind of rotating each year grazing system is kind of where we started. We would do cover crops in the pasture section of things. We tried 1 year to just let whatever come up, and that was not great. We got definitely a lot of aggressive weeds, so we started using cover crops. During this time, we were still using soil work, and so we would work the soil, plant cover crops, graze it, and then we'd end up working the soil again, plant cover crops, graze it, and in that time, we did that for about 5 years. We ran this production system for about 5 years that way, and that is the only fertility regimen that we did on this farm. It was completely based off of cover crops and animal impact. What we found generally with that system after about 5 years is that we were able to maintain fertility pretty well, but generally we were slowly kind of seeing soil organic matter drop, slowly kind of seeing some of our things drop, and so we weren't building soil each year, we weren't generating our farm in the way we wanted to. And so we kind of took a look about 3 years ago at what we wanted to change about the system. And really what we landed on was we can keep working soil and keep planting cover crops and use drills behind tractors to get the cover crops going, and kind of all these things. But the kind of ethos of the farm was to move more in line with the 5 principles of soil health, more in line with biology, and more in line with a natural system. And so instead of moving into that system where we increased and kept doing soil work, we decided to move into a system that basically was a no-till system with animals involved. At that time, we also brought compost into the system. Previous to that, we had not used any compost on the farm. And so where we landed is about basically 5 years, just animals and cover crops. It went okay. And now we're 3 years into using animals, cover crops, no-till, and compost. And we're seeing a ton of success with that system. That we're seeing our soil metrics consistently go up. Integrating animals has been a gigantic process of trial and error, which I think all farming is. But there's so many nuances when grazing animals in vicinity of vegetable productions or in vegetable production fields that we kind of learned basically every hard lesson we could. I can go down the kind of list of animals we've used. One of the first and main animals we used was cattle. The cattle were great. They hammered cover crop. They left manure. That was awesome. But they're big animals. And if you have say cultivated soil or soil that you've been tilling, off and on for years, they really do a number on it in terms of compaction. We had one time we just put 2 bulls in there and they just laid around and dust wallowed and stuff like that, and they just destroyed a whole plot just on their own. And so we really tried cows. We believe in cattle here on this farm, but cattle in this particular system, and I think generally in a system that has any kind of tillage in it, is just a recipe for compaction and difficulties. So that was one of the animals we tried. The next one that was definitely not successful for us was pigs. We ran pigs through here. I think that everyone knows that pigs can be pretty rough on ground. It took us a while to recover some of the plots that they had grazed in. They left a ton of manure, and once we got it recovered, some of those plots are very fertile now and do a great job. But it was a definite, you can't do a no-till system in pigs so far, at least from our perspective. The third thing we tried was broilers and chicken tractors, kind of like a Joel Salatin style. That was actually really cool. You just have to make sure you have the room for them. The only issue with those is if you're moving them with any kind of piece of equipment, like a gator or a side-by-side or anything like that. If you're not moving them just by hand, you have tires in the field all the time, and that was a issue with compaction. Then we kind of got down to layers, which I thought was going to be a really good one, but the really big downside of layers is that they are incredible at escaping and finding your salad greens. And there's nothing worse than coming out on harvest morning and seeing chickens pecking around in your salad greens, and it's all wash. And so what we landed on was sheep. Sheep were kind of one of the ones that we were trialing in between a lot of those. They're easy to manage. They're not as heavy as cattle. The way that they graze with chomping action is really nice for kind of getting a lot of the cover crops down to a kind of consistent grazing, which is just kind of nice for management. And they're easy to move. They're really easy to move. And so we ended up landing, after 5 years of trial and error with different livestock enterprises, mixing them in with our vegetable production, we found that the sheep are basically our kind of go-to solid choice. So the system for the last 8 years now has been 2 blocks in pasture, 2 blocks in production. We want to open up a 3rd production block, mostly because we want the space and that it's an important part of our apprentice program to have apprentices have some parts of our field to manage. And we're kind of tapped out in space currently. And so because education is such an important part of this farm, we want to make sure that we have enough space to get as many people here to educate as possible. Beyond that, we've been just moving consistently away from mechanization on the farm. We still use a BCS, but I think one of the things that people don't talk about with BCSs very often is that they're heavy, cumbersome, and they're not a piece of equipment that is necessarily accessible to everyone, depending on, the one we have is there's only a handful of people on our team that can even handle it. And so running a farm with a piece of equipment that only a few people can handle is kind of a tough sell for us. And so we've been looking for ways to kind of pull as much mechanization out of our farm as possible and get as few tires on our farm as possible as well. We're using tractors and stuff. We're just seeing a lot of compaction with that. And so what I want to do is when we have cover crop stands that we're getting ready to go into production with, so say we have a block of hairy vetch and we're going to put, it's big, it's ready to go, it's ready to be mowed, and we're getting ready to put, say, winter squash in there. Although it is fantastic to run through with the BCS and flail mow it and get it ready, we started exploring this idea of, is there a world where we can get another animal impact on that spot rather than use the mower to do it? And so we're kind of working on this system that we're going to start trialing next year that basically is taking a smaller flock of sheep, 5, 6 or so, having them kind of have a central plot of our 4 quadrants that they can kind of live in, and we can pull them out of there very easily, because like I kind of said, sheep are really easy to kind of get to follow you. Shake some alfalfa pellets, they'll kind of follow quite easily, and then fence them off into, like, say, our cover crop plots and let them hammer them down and get that extra animal impact, not use a mower, and hopefully get the added fertility benefits from that. And so that's what the system we're moving towards is this smaller flock that we can kind of micro graze, where we find that it is going to be very beneficial. I think that one of the only things to say about all this is totally on paper, and we'll see how it works next year. And it could go terribly wrong. But I think it's a pretty exciting prospect. We do see that the animals have a fantastic effect on the soil. And so we'd like to get as much animal impact as possible. And if we can if we can increase our space and actually increase the amount of little grazings we get a year, I think that'd be a big benefit for the farm in general. A really cool thing about Greenacres is we have a full-fledged research department. The bummer of regenerative agriculture is that there's not as much being funded for research as we would really hope. And so having our own department to kind of work with is just an incredible gift, and we put them to work for sure. We base a lot of our research on soil health and ecology. So we're taking PLFA, Haney tests consistently each year to track how our soil's doing. We do penetrometer tests, we do infiltration tests, and we monitor all that to see how our practices, how our animal integration, how our no-till systems are affecting our soil. And we try a lot of different stuff each year, and so we're able to kind of keep a pulse on how we're doing through that data. We've recently started really investing in hedgerows. It's been an absolute joy to have those, and we're already seeing, just anecdotally, an increase in birds, snakes, bugs, all kinds of, all the great things that you see in hedgerows. But what we did, because we only started implementing it 2 years ago, is we started doing insect surveys, bird surveys from before we started implementing hedgerows, and then we will for the next 5 to 10 years as our hedgerows mature. What we're hoping to get from that is ecological data on what kind of diversity we're attracting through hedgerows and the amount of diversity we're attracting through hedgerows. I think that a lot of us in the farming community, like, anecdotally can see it and know that they're really an amazing thing to have on the farm, but putting a little bit of data behind that is really valuable to us, and we really believe in that. So that's another point of data we're tracking. So the other part of research that we're doing is as we kind of build this system, what we're kind of the line we're trying to follow is being as closely in line with Mother Nature as possible. That's kind of where the 5 principles of soil health come in. But one of the kind of ways you can mimic certain aspects of Mother Nature is I wish it would be really cool to do controlled burns here, but that process doesn't necessarily fit into the system. But we are interested in adding that element into our soil, and so biochar is something that we've kind of been investing in over the last couple years in terms of research. Comurrently, we're doing a project in conjunction with OSU to test 2 different styles of biochar in compost. So they're co-composted biochar, which basically means that the biochar goes into the compost at the beginning of the compost stage, is kind of activated in that compost, and then comes out ready to kind of be applied to our soil. We have a control compost, which is our normal compost that we make in-house. Our second batch is our woody compost, or our woody biochar compost, which is just a classic wood biochar. And the third one is broiler litter biochar, which is just the refuse from broiler litter. So it's got like manures and stuff in it. It tends to have a little bit of a higher nitrogen content. And so we're testing control, woody biochar, and broiler litter biochar as kind of to see if there's what effects they can have on our soil. We're testing things like yield. We're testing things like we're doing tissue analysis of the crops being grown in those beds and seeing what kind of data comes back on that. We're going to be planting cover crops into those biochar patches after we finish production in them, when they rotate back into pasture, and we're going to check forage quality on those cover crops to see if we're getting better forage for our animals. And then on top of that, also we're testing the gas, what the kind of soil is off-gassing. There's some data out there to suggest that biochar is good at capturing some of these volatile gases that we're concerned about for the atmosphere, and seeing if applying biochar to our fields can actually limit some of those gases that are being released by soil and released by kind of some of these things. So a really cool thing about our compost is that I should say a really cool thing about our farm is that we have an education stable on our farm. We have anywhere between 16 and 21 education horses, which is awesome for the education side of things that we care a lot about, but it's even more exciting when you have all that manure and bedding. And so we're able to take the refuse from the stables, we run it through a compost system. Our kind of rough recipe is any green material we have from the field or from school lunches or whatever we collect. We add wood chips, we add some of our broiler litter, and then we also add that horse manure. Since horse manure is a very carbon heavy, horses are not ruminants, so they have a higher carbon manure than a ruminant would. And so with that plus broiler litter, plus bedding, plus wood chips, we make a very high carbon compost. That is just the context of our farm. Those are what we have available to us. And so we don't really have very many options to alter our recipe. And what we decided kind of was, rather than trying to find all these ways to alter our recipe and get our nitrogen up and all these things in our compost, that we actually just have made the most incredible compost mulch. And so we ended up using that in a lot of our systems, and that's what our biochar goes into. If you want to keep up with this project, you can find out more about our organization and about this project at our website, which is green-acres.org. We do have some old videos of the layfield system on our YouTube page, and you should be able to hopefully look for more of those coming soon.
All right, how awesome is Greenacres, right? Huge shout out to Ian and also to Jen, who provided me with some of the additional footage that you saw. I will post links for Greenacres in the show notes so that you can ride along as they continue to build this project. Again, we will hear more from them soon. Like this video if you like this video. If you're not subscribed to the channel, hit the subscribe button. And if you are subscribed, you're awesome. Support our work by picking up a copy of the Living Soil Handbook or other merch from no-tillgrowers.com. Become a Patreon member at patreon.com/no-tillgrowers, or just hit that super thanks button. That works too. Also, pro tip, if you go to Cincinnati, you got to go to an FC Cincinnati game. It's like the best fan experience in the US, in my opinion. But I'm a soccer nerd. Otherwise, super thanks for watching. We'll see you later. Bye.
Maybe give a little bit of beat.
Yeah, and that's like,
It's getting in the. It's like a native beat too.
yeah, we got it.
Friend.
It's like, I like what you're doing here.